Hello and welcome back to the 16th lesson of the Year 2 Theory and Methods section of the online series. Press pause as you add this as your title for this section: the concepts of modernity and post-modernity in relation to sociological theory. It's a useful idea to think about the terms or concepts of modernity and post-modernity as though they are specific eras or historical periods. You firstly need to know what the features are of that particular era, and then how this relates or related to sociological theory. The first concept or era to look at is this era of modernity. In normal language, modern would refer to something current, such as the new iPhone. But in the context of this sociological debate and your Sociology A-level, it has a specific meaning. Modernism, or the era of modernity, refers to a particular way of thinking about the world, which has its origin in the Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries. So in this sense, we can talk about sociology as a product of the modern era, or the era of modernity. Many sociologists distinguish between pre-modern and modern societies. It has allowed them to identify some of the key changes that have taken place in human history and discuss the significance of these changes. There is, however, some debate about this last point, and one we will revisit later, and that's whether we really have developed into this new era of postmodernity. But pre-modernity then, this is a catch-all term that covers really a wide historical period, and we can talk about this covering the period sort of from about pre-1750 to the beginning of humankind. So that includes these hunter-gatherer groups, the societies based on agriculture, all of the ancient civilizations. But as a sociology student, the good news is we can just sort of put them in the box of pre-modern and not really worry about having any real in-depth knowledge of this pre-modern society. But you do need to know about the changes that are said to be features of the era known as modernity. It is these changes or transformations that have led to the establishment of ultimately modernist sociological theories. One of the most significant changes was industrialisation. Now, industrialisation led to significant changes in how we worked, where we worked, how and where we lived. The Industrial Revolution began from around 1750-ish onwards and meant for the first time workers experienced things such as the factory and assembly production line methods. This resulted in the manufacture of standardised goods for a mass market for the first time. Henry Ford reported that he told his management team, any customer can have a car painted any colour that he wants, so long as it is black. As people moved away from working in agricultural settings, this gave rise to the process of urbanisation, meaning the populations of towns and cities increased rapidly. People worked for businesses in a capitalist society rather than for themselves. New social classes emerged in this era. Work and social class were seen as the main forms of social division, and social identity as well, with culture and politics being seen as very much class-related. One of the most crucial changes in the era of modernity was how the world was explained. Out went tradition, out went superstition, and in came what is known as the Enlightenment. Where once there was darkness, there is now light. In the era of modernity, yes, we did gain electricity, but we also gained a new way of thinking and explaining things. This included not only the belief in science, but this overall belief in the ability of human progress, rationality, and reason. This may help you to picture this process. The idea here is supposed to be that modernity is providing us with the social conditions for the establishment of the modern sociological theories that we've been studying. Taken together, these changes in society are helping to facilitate or allow the view that sociological theory and sociological research can provide insight into and explanations of the social world, and this could be used to improve it. So even though we've got different sociologists here, in the era of modernity, these different approaches are all said to come from the same, if you like, social conditions. They're similar in as much as they're all modernist theories. They're similar in as much as they're all optimistic, with this strongly held belief that society was developing progressively and we could attempt to explain it and understand it. Or to put it another way, modernity is associated with all of the main sociological ideas and theories that we've looked at so far, lessons 1 to 15, and including this bit of lesson 16. That is the theory diagram. Some people believe that in the same way that society moved from being in the era of pre-modernity to the era of modernity, so too in recent years we've seen another change. The era of post-modernity is characterised by different features, and this has led to a debate about the extent to which society has changed and about what sort of approach we should be using in sociology. But please bear this in mind when we are discussing post-modernity. This quote asks you to compare summarising it to grabbing hold of a jelly with a clamp. But we must try to summarise it, and we can do this by looking at the main features of the era of post-modernity and how that links and relates to sociological theory. We start here. A feature of the postmodern era is that it's characterised by chaos, uncertainty, and the collapse of social structures. The social structures are breaking down. This is the very opposite of most modernist sociological theories. Using the family as the example, we can see how this postmodern idea of the collapse of social structures means that we cannot make general assumptions about its role, as Talcott Parsons did, for example, when he talked about the two basic and irreducible functions of the family. In this case, Stacey's saying there is no such thing as a family, or if there is, it's fluid, diverse, and unresolved. Therefore, we cannot make the same sorts of statements about the family that the modernist sociologists did, because it doesn't exist in that same format. Another change that postmodernists refers to, the global culture. The process of globalization means that we have a different way of thinking in terms of norms and values. Time and space has been compressed. The world has become smaller as we are able to travel so much more quickly. But also, we can communicate in real time using technologies. This would be a really good phrase to use in your sociology work and provides us with another example of a feature of a postmodern society. Lyotard describes postmodernism as an incredulity towards meta-narratives. Instead of having the certainty of the era of modernity, instead postmodernity is characterised by instead a relativity of knowledge. The incredulity of the postmodern era is not confined to just sociology, but also it extends to other meta-narratives, including science. In the modern era, science was seen as the route to salvation. In the postmodern era, it's seen as something that could potentially bring about the destruction or end of the world, courtesy of, in this example, the nuclear bomb. Baudrillard, as a postmodernist, sees life in the postmodern era as being so dominated by media imagery that it's become what he calls a media-saturated society. The mass media, he says, used to reflect some basic reality, but now the media images dominate and distort the way we see the world. But the media present what he calls a simulacra, that is, images that appear to reflect events in the real world, but actually have no basis in reality. We can see this in advertising, but also in other forms of media as well. And this is a good term to use when describing one of the features of the postmodern era, and we associate this with this idea with the work of Jean Baudrillard. This leads to a hyper-reality. So-called reality television provides us with a really good example of this. For the postmodernist, there is no real meaning to the signs that exist in our society anymore. In the postmodern era, the sources of identity that people had in modernity related to the work they did or the social group that someone belonged to, such as their class, age, gender or ethnicity, these things are no longer relevant, they say, in the postmodern era in terms of shaping our lives. For example, the worker in the service sector no longer define themselves in terms of what they do, according to the postmodernist. Instead, people pick and mix their identity. The image becomes more important than the meaning. For the postmodernist, these changes have led to a break away from the modern society. In this new era, the era of postmodernity, the theories of modernity are no longer relevant because of a change in the social conditions. This offers a summary of some of the changes to different aspects of life. Your task is to try and link that change to sociological theory. I've given you a few examples here. Remember though, not everybody agrees that we're in the era of postmodernity, and that's the sort of debate that you might include in your written work. As we've done with all of the other theories, we can also directly criticise postmodernity. There are 4 direct criticisms here. You might want to press pause to make a note of these. Finally then, is social class really no longer important? The postmodernists would say social class is no longer important, but the modernist sociological theory would say that it still has an important role to play.